Hey YouTube, Charlie Black 20 back once again. I have another movie review for you, and this will be a fictionalized historical movie called The Ghost and the Darkness. Now, this movie, very quickly, the director was Stephen Hopkins. No relation to me, haha. It was produced by Gail Ann Hurd, Paul B. Radin, and A. Kitman Ho. It was written by William Goldman. The two main stars are Michael Douglas and Val Kilmer. The runtime is 110 minutes, so that's about an hour and 50 minutes. It was released in theaters on October 11th, 1996. The budget was $55 million, but it only grossed $75 million, so a little bit of a profit, but not much. Alright, getting right into it. We are heading to the continent of Africa. And what is happening is that this man, an English engineer named John Henry Patterson, is being assigned to the river in a place called Tsavo to help build a bridge for the British for two reasons. One, to compete with other rival nations on quote-unquote civilizing Africa, and also to end slavery in Africa, which this is taking place in 1898. So slavery is being attacked on an international level by nearly every foreign nation, at least in theory. Now, the person being sent, John Henry Patterson, he meets with his boss, the guy who's hired him. His name is Sir Henry Beaumont. And immediately into meeting him, we see that he is a real dick. He makes it very clear that he does not care about John Henry Patterson. He does not care about doing anything except getting results so that it looks good on him. And if there's failure, he will make sure that others suffer for it. He enjoys that, and he makes that clear that that's what goes on. And Patterson says, I've never not finished a job. I love bridges, building bridges. And I love Africa, and I can't wait to go. And so he does say goodbye to his wife, who we learn is pregnant with their first child. And so Patterson wants to keep to his schedule, partly so that Beaumont can't fire him, partly to keep his reputation as a good engineer, but also because he wants to be back in time to meet his son, which his wife says with complete confidence, I think it's a boy. Well, no, she says it is a boy. She has confidence in that. Ha. So, one sec. Patterson gets to Africa, arrives right outside of Tsavo, and meets a man named Starling, who is another Englishman. I think he might have been Scottish or Irish, because he has a different accent. And he is there to try to convert natives to Christianity. Obviously not a lot of success in that for him, because he's a really nice guy. He's really cool. But Patterson is spouting off all these facts about Africa that Starling doesn't know, because even though he's been there for quite a while. Patterson's just arrived, and he knows all these facts about the animals and stuff. He's impressed Starling, at least. But when they get there, Patterson learns about all the troubles that he has to face. Number one being that the workers don't get along with each other. You've got the Muslims who don't eat pork, but they do eat cows. But then you've also got the Hindus who do eat pork, but don't eat cows. And then you've also got a bunch of African workers of many different religions. All of them, about 8,000 workers all together, and they're all supposed to build this one thing, this one bridge. And we also learn that there's a problem with disease, like there's a malaria or typhus. There's an epidemic going on. And the hospital, such as it is run by the doctor, Dr. Hawthorne. If you remember, he's the actor who played King Theoden in Lord of the Rings. He's playing Dr. Hawthorne, and he has a very dry sense of humor. But he's also very cynical. He says the only reason that this railroad is being built is to protect the ivory trade. And Patterson asks him, "Then why are you here, Doctor?" And he says, "Who else would hire me?" And him and Starling don't get along at all. They keep sniping at each other. But Hawthorne does say that there's something that Patterson probably brought bad luck with him, because he has an attendant, one of his hospital aides, in a cast, and he says this guy was attacked by a man-eater, meaning a lion, that was trying to eat him, and that the only reason he got away was because he was riding a donkey, and the donkey took the brunt of the attack. And he says, anything you can do about this right now, even though you just arrived? And Patterson says, with any luck, I'll have it sorted out by tonight. And he grabs his rifle. Patterson grabs his rifle. It's a bolt-action, I believe he called it a 30-06, or, yeah, 30-06, I believe. And Starling asks to accompany him for the night. And so they hide up in this tree with a goat tied on a stick nearby. Starling is complaining about a cramp in his leg, but he can't get down from the tree anymore because Patterson tells him the lion will eat you. And later that night, Starling is asleep on the branch. Patterson sees the lion, takes the shot. One shot kills it. And the next morning, everybody's cheering about the death of this man-eating lion. It seems he's united the workers by taking away their fear in a way. And we see all these other people. We meet the character Samuel, who is also, he's an African, and he seems to be the one person that everybody seems to respect, both Hindus, Africans, and Muslims. And a lot of these people are workers who have been imported from India. Some of them are recruited from local villages. Others are brought in from other parts of Africa. But Patterson starts figuring out what to do about the bridge. He starts gathering up all the necessary materials, the necessary plans. He gives Starling a certain amount of time to get certain things built. And slowly but surely, things start happening. They start getting things built, the rails, they're almost to the river. We're not sure how much time has passed, but we realize that they keep talking about things, and we realize that Patterson is ahead of schedule at this point, which is pretty awesome. But we also meet a man named an African named Mahina, who claims to have killed a lion with his bare hands when he was younger. And he's a very respected man. He's considered very, very tough. He and Patterson become quite respectable to each other. But one night, after they've finished the bridge, or at least the foundation for it, Mahina and a bunch of his companions go to bed in this tent, in a circle. And something drags Mahina out of the tent. And we see that he's just being dragged and dragged and dragged, screaming. And the next morning, all these vultures are picking at his corpse. Patterson arrives over there, fires off a bunch of gunshots at the vultures, and Dr. Hawthorne claims that the lion must have licked his skin so he could drink his blood, and he claims that lions don't eat like this. Are you sure it was a lion? Patterson just says, we followed its tracks. And so Patterson that night hides up in another tree near where Mahina was killed. And he actually falls asleep at one point, and he wakes up thinking he hears screams, but then it's all quiet. And so the next morning, he's had no luck finding this lion. And there's a huge argument going on between Samuel and this other worker who seems to be the head of the Sepoys, or the Indians, named Abdullah. And the argument is that about the fact that there's been another kill. Somebody else has been killed. A man wandering alone at night was killed by the lions. And that's 2 dead in 2 nights. And so Samuel comes up with the idea of thorn bushes, which you build them in a fence around you to create a makeshift barrier, like lots and lots of thorn bushes. It's called a boma. And then you also light lots of fires at night to keep the lions away. And Patterson also puts in a strict curfew. And then we see there's a lot of racial tension between them, where Patterson says, I will build the bridge, I will kill the lions, and I will build the bridge. And Abdullah says, of course you will. You're white, you can do anything. And Patterson basically realizes he's being, challenged. He says, it would be a mistake for us not to work together on this, Abdullah. And so they all build up these fences. We see Starling getting his hands dirty and getting them bloody, moving these fences together. And I think for the next few days, they don't get any attacks whatsoever. And Starling actually that night is talking with Samuel and Patterson about how he was trying to convert them to the faith. And Patterson says, I'm beyond conversion. My mother's a Roman Catholic and my father's a Protestant. And Starling looks at Samuel, and Samuel says, I have 4 wives. Good luck. But that next day, as they're continuing to work on reinforcing the fences and building the bridge, Patterson gets a letter from his wife about her pregnancy and how much she misses him, and that maybe that once the baby's born, they should go on traveling, like to Africa. And then one of the lions comes out of the bushes, and it begins to chase these workers, and it grabs one of them and begins to maul him to death. Patterson and Starling hear all these screams, and Samuel too, and they go running towards the area. Starling grabs one of the Martini rifles. Patterson grabs his .308 and another shotgun for Samuel. And they approach this building, which I think is like a train depot. And they see the lion around the corner, and they're slowly approaching it, trying to get a clear shot. And right as Patterson and Starling are taking aim at this lion, which is eating the body in front of them, they take aim, and then all of a sudden they hear another roar above them on the roof of the building, and a second lion jumps down and cuts Patterson on the arm, holding his rifle. And it also takes down Starling. And the 2 lions stare at the men for a minute. Then they take a leg off the body, the dead worker, and head into the bushes, into the tall grass. And we see Samuel cradling Starling, who his neck is completely mangled by the claws of this lion, just completely. He died in seconds, bleeding out. And Patterson starts saying a prayer right then and there. So, sorry, Starling, you were a good man. And for the next few days, we get the story from Samuel about these animals, these 2 lions, that this was an unprecedented thing, having 2 man-eaters, because man-eaters hunt alone. And so more and more people keep getting taken. It's almost a nightly occurrence that at least one person will be taken. And so one day, Beaumont, the guy that hired Patterson, arrives on train to berate Patterson for being behind schedule at this point, because the workers are so scared that you can't get a lot of work done when these men are scared. And Abdullah and Patterson are talking. Abdullah saying, I can't stop these people from leaving because a lot of the workers are trying to leave. Just be content, I've decided to stay. And Patterson has to try one more tactic, which he tells Abdullah, okay, you might as well go with them, because you can go back to the families of the dead men and tell them that you were too scared to stay because you couldn't master your courage. And Abdullah, at this point, I think is the only guy who has any control over these workers to get them to stay. And so I guess he convinces them somehow by basically doing the same thing Patterson did, which was accusing them of cowardice. You can accuse a man of a lot of things. You accuse him of cowardice, you're usually going to get a better result. Pretty typical of the time. So Beaumont gets off the train and is demanding answers from Patterson about the delays. And Patterson's saying, I requested troops. Can you get some? And Beaumont's like, absolutely not. That's not happening. And he says, I brought Bibles for Starling. Where is he? And Samuel says, here he comes. gesturing behind Beaumont. And Beaumont turns around, and it's a coffin that's being carried onto the train. And Beaumont's like, okay, what's happening here? And Patterson brings him to the medical tent. Beaumont says, there's nothing wrong with these people. And Patterson says they're afraid. It's 2 lions, 2 man-eaters that are causing all the trouble. And Beaumont says, I thought you were a hunter, Patterson. This is Africa. And Patterson's like, these lions are not like lions. Samuel says, the ghost and the darkness have come. That's what they call the lions, the ghost and the darkness. Pretty scary. So, Patterson shows Beaumont this contraption. It's called the contraption. And it's a train car with an open end. And there's they're using these steel slates to form like a wall, kind of a wall. It's hard to say. Basically, it's a bunch of guardrails put together like this on 2 ropes that if the lion enters into the boxcar, it will trip a wire, and then these slates will come down like this and trap the lion in. And inside the train car are these steel bars that can't be moved, and Patterson will use a human bait behind the bars. And so basically, he'll be able to shoot the lion point-blank range right then and there. And Beaumont says, are you running a high fever, man? I knew I should have gotten somebody else for the job. I'm going to contact Remington. You know Remington? And it turns out Remington is a renowned hunter. And Beaumont wants to get in contact with him, bring him to Africa to hunt down these lions. And Patterson says, by the time he finds him, I'll have the lions dead and the bridge finished. And Beaumont says, fine, the job's still yours, only because it would take too long to find a replacement. If you fail, I'll make sure to ruin your reputation. Great guy. And so for the next few nights, Patterson is sleeping in that train car, waiting for the lions to come. But they don't. They keep taking more and more people. So he employs these 3 men who are apparently very good with rifles. He gives them rifles to shoot the lion. And apparently the reason they're so good is because they are murderers and criminals. And he tells them that's a good thing because they're going to be killing this lion. And so, I don't know if it's the first night, but probably is. One of the lions steps into the trap. It works. The contraption works. Which, Patterson said he came up with the idea of trapping an animal in there in India with a tiger. But that it didn't work there either. So, they wake up when the lion trips it. And it starts roaring and roaring and roaring and slamming against these bars, trying to get at them. And they keep shooting, and they keep hitting the metal. They keep missing. Every single shot they're firing is missing. And their ears are starting to hurt from this roaring. And they break the lamp, which causes a fire, and they're getting scared. One of them is trying to get out. And one of the bullets hits a piece of the back gate, which breaks the rope holding part of it together, and it creates a gap for the lion to jump through. And Patterson is furious with them in the morning. He says, I should have given you rocks instead of rifles. He couldn't have been more than 3 feet from you, and you couldn't even wound him. And then Abdullah is confronting Patterson, along with a huge crowd of the workers. He's saying, you are the problem in Tsavo. You listen when I talk. And then Abdullah gets a gun pointed at his head. And we see Michael Douglas. I forgot, Val Kilmer plays Patterson. Michael Douglas plays Remington, who has just arrived, points the gun at Abdullah's head, and basically forces him to tell everybody to get back, and basically diffuses the situation for Patterson. And he tells Patterson, I don't want to be in charge of building that bridge, and I don't want to be here any longer than I have to be. And knowing Beaumont, you're not the idiot he says you are. So, I'm going to kill these lions and leave, and you're going to help me. You got any problem with that? Actually, no. Good. And so, he brings in these other Africans. I think they were called Mazuli or Mazi. Let me double check that just to be safe. Maasai. They're called Maasai. And they're African hunters that work with Douglas. I'm sorry, with Remington. And he goes to the hospital and he says it's a perfect target for the lions, that there's lots of disease, lots of blood, lots of smells that would bring a predator in. And he says, I saw fresh paw prints outside, so we're going to have to rebuild this whole hospital somewhere else. And he makes a big deal of it to Dr. Hawthorne. So they rebuild the hospital along with putting another boma around it, another boma fence. And he and Samuel are going to be hunting the lion the next day with the other tribesmen. And he says to Patterson, I would like to have you along because we're going to need you. And we also don't want your men to lose respect for you if you don't accompany us on this hunt. And it turns out Douglas, God damn, sorry, that Remington, we learn his backstory, which is that his family did not survive the Civil War in America, that his family was on the losing side, the South, and the very old, very young, his entire family is gone. So he travels the world, never to return to America, finding his way to Africa and hunting every beast he can. And it gnaws at him, apparently. And he's a really, really fascinating character, Remington. And then Dr. Hawthorne offers to exchange guns with Patterson because his gun is much more powerful and he wants him to have the best equipment. And so Patterson accepts, switches guns, and the next day they begin the hunt on one of the lions. They find it, they track it to a thicket, and they start to hunt it down. And at one point, Patterson is confronted face to face with the lion. He takes aim, pulls the trigger, nothing happens. The gun had misfired. And the lion and him are just staring at each other. And we hear all these echoing screams of the old workers who were killed by this lion going through Patterson's mind. And Remington sees him. He's like, shoot him, shoot him. And then he fires both barrels of his shotgun, and the lion runs off. And so Patterson, Remington confronts him and says, what happened? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Misfire. Is that the first time? And Samuel has to tell Remington, oh, that gun belongs to Dr. Hawthorne. And Remington's like, you exchanged weapons? You took an untested rifle into battle? And it's clear that they have there's a problem, that something just isn't going right. Nothing's going right for them. And so the other warriors, the African warriors that came with Remington, they claim that they are convinced that these lions are not real lions, that they are devils, that these are ghosts, these are dead tribesmen brought back for revenge. And so they leave because they don't feel that, they feel that there's nothing they can do, that this isn't going to work. So Remington stays behind with Patterson and Samuel and Dr. Hawthorne and a bunch of the other workers who are still there. And Douglas decides, Remington decides to use the old hospital as a kind of a trap by having them put huge amounts of blood, huge amounts of meat, 2 live steers, and himself and Patterson inside to lure the lions to the old hospital to get a good shot at them. While Dr. Hawthorne and Samuel sleep in a tent close to the hospital, the new one. And that night, Remington and Patterson have some conversation. Like Remington mentions that contraption that you built. It was your idea? Yeah. I came up with something myself in, I forget where. Where was it? Well, Remington came up with the same idea, and Patterson's like, well, yours worked. No, in fact, it didn't. It was still a good idea, though. And then Patterson and Remington are under siege. The two lions are circling the place. They're not touching any of the food. The steers are acting up inside, which alerts Remington and Patterson, and they're trying to find these lions and get a good shot at them, but they can't. And then all of a sudden they take these chains off one of the doors, which is only partially open, and they take aim outside. Nothing there. Nothing at all. And then we see the hospital where the two lions go on a rampage in the hospital, killing anybody they can get their hands on. And a fire starts burning the hospital tent. Dr. Hawthorne rushes back to the hospital. Patterson and Remington rush over there as fast as they can. They see the damage, that so many of these workers are just dead, and they also find Dr. Hawthorne dead. And so the next morning, we see all these workers, so many of them, thousands, jumping on this train that's taking off, including Abdullah. All these workers are leaving. There's only a handful of people left. And so Remington and Patterson, they mentioned something to each other that, Patterson mentioned something to Remington about being hit, that something happened in their minds, that something not only does it not make sense, but it's really affecting them at that point, which is what happened with Patterson when the gun misfired when he was aiming at the lion. And Remington says, "You just been hit. The getting up is up to you." And Patterson says the same thing to Remington this time. And he says, "And just remember, they're just lions." And so they decide to track the lions by themselves because they found fresh pug marks or paw prints. And they followed them across the grass, this tall grass, and they get into this discussion, Remington tells the story about a bully in his old hometown, but that he wasn't even the problem. His brother was even worse. But when they were together, they were deadly. And so they find this cave along with the lion fur outside of it on these thorns. So they figure this is where the lions are. So they light these lamps and they head inside. And inside this thing, they find dried blood and dozens of skeletons, human skeletons, along with like rings, silver, like earrings. They find just tons of bones, human bones. And neither of them can believe their eyes. And Remington says they're doing it for the pleasure. Lions don't do this. And so that night, Patterson comes up with another idea to build a scaffold, which is called a macaw, in a clearing, along with a baboon as bait on a stick. And he would be on it by himself. Remington says, I'm going to be in a tree too far away to help you. And so that's the final trap they're laying for this lion. And so, excuse me. Excuse me. They set it up that right before evening. They discuss how many people the lions might have killed, probably over 100 at this point. And then Remington says, "Oh, Merry Christmas, it's that month." But that night, there's a lot of fog, a lot of mist. And that baboon, which apparently lions hate the sound of a baboon in the movie, and one of them grabs the baboon. One of the lions grabs the baboon, which alerts them that because it stops screeching, that the lion is there, and then it starts stalking Patterson on his macaw. Or macawn. I'm sorry, a macawn. And he's trying to aim for it, trying to look for it on both sides of the scaffolding. And then, because he's sitting so still, this owl tries to land on his head, and he just falls off. He literally falls off this macawn and lands on the ground. And the lion comes for him. Because Remington had mentioned, "I think they're after you. That's why this is going to work." And the lion starts charging in at his prone form. Luckily, Remington had given Patterson his Howden pistol, which is a double-barrel pistol. And Patterson pulls it out and fires it at the lion, and the lion jumps away. And Remington is rushing forward at that point, trying to get an angle on the lion. He can't get it, and they find him and Patterson. Patterson picks up his other gun, his .308, his rifle, and they find blood, which means he hit it. He hit the lion. And so they go looking for it in this mist. And they're looking, and they're looking, and they're looking. And then Patterson turns his back to this rock outcropping, and the lion jumps at Patterson. But Remington turns, bam, bam, kills it, dead. And him, Patterson, and Samuel celebrate that night by opening bottles of champagne and drinking. And something I found curious is that the one person who's supposed to be uncivilized is Samuel, and he's the only one who's drinking from a glass. The other two are just drinking straight from the bottle. And it's obvious that they're all getting drunk. And they have this interesting conversation about life and memory and all these things. And it's very clear. And they start saying, we see that Patterson and Remington become friends, basically, because they're calling each other by their first names. It turns out that Remington's first name is Charles, and as we said, it's John for Patterson. So they go to sleep, and then we cut to a scene with John Patterson finishing the bridge in Africa, and his wife has arrived on the next train, and she's there with their son, who obviously has been born. And she's there to see her husband, and he's rushing back to the train station to see her. And when he spots her through the crowd, she spots him, and she's waving, waving, waving. And John sees the lion coming for her from the tall grass. And he's yelling, "Go back, go back, go back!" And the lion jumps on her. And then John, he wakes up. It was a nightmare. A total nightmare. Goes outside to the campfire, puts some water on his face, looks over at Charles's tent, and sees that there's that it's open, and that the back of it has a bunch of tears in it. So he grabs Charles's gun, which was unfired, and follows the trail of blood to the tall grass, and he finds Samuel there, and they cover Charles's body with a blanket, and they burn it later. And when they hear the lion roaring around them, Patterson just takes one of the sticks from the fire, starts lighting up the tall grass. Samuel does the same, and they are going across. Patterson is going across this bridge that's still unfinished. There's a lot of holes in it, and at this point, Samuel says, "John, where are you going?" And Patterson says, "I'm going to sort it out." He starts firing his rifle into the air, and he uses up all the ammo, just trying to bring the lion in. Pulls out the shotgun that Charles left behind, and is looking for the lion, which jumps out of nowhere at him. He fires the barrels, and the gun gets knocked out of his hand under the bridge, and he can't get to it. So he fires the pistol at the lion. He starts to reload, but then the lion's coming after him from underneath the bridge. It comes up and at him, and he just takes off running down the bridge. Samuel says, "Get down, get down!" But John's not stopping, so Samuel makes a run, and Patterson jumps down off the bridge and climbs a tree, just barely avoiding the lion, but it starts climbing up the tree too, and it's covered in blood. I'm not sure if it was its own blood or maybe Charles's, but it's covered in blood, and it's trying to reach him with his claws. And Samuel yells to Patterson, "John, here, take my gun!" And he throws it to John, but it's just a little short, and it lands on the ground. So Patterson jumps out of the tree, lands on the ground, really winded. The lion jumps down and is approaching him. He fires the first barrel. The lion goes down on its belly, and it's basically crawling towards him at this point, trying to get at him. And at the last second, he manages to fire the last barrel straight into the lion's face. And it bites down on this wooden log less than 6 inches from his left leg. And that's the end of the Man-Eaters of Tsavo. The next scene is John greeting this new train of the workers coming back, including Abdullah, a new preacher, and also his wife with their son. So that's what happened in the movie The Ghost in the Darkness. Now, this was a good movie if you want some historical horror. A little background. The story is a true story, but they've obviously dramatized it. It's also based off of the book that John Henry Patterson himself wrote called The Man-Eaters of Tsavo, and it describes his adventures in Africa and things like that, and especially the part where he's trying to find the man-eaters. There's a bunch of videos that describe this, documentaries, and a couple of books. But the reality is that there was never a character named Remington. The hunting was done by Patterson himself. And he had a lot of problems that we see from the 18th century. The only thing we can say for him is that he wasn't a coward. Like, this is a man who, night after night after night, was going out hunting these lions who have been eating people. And he goes out by himself every night trying to find them. And he finally gets lucky in killing both within a short span of time of each other. And so, if you want to hear the real story, or at least parts of the real story, oh, I forget. There's estimates that the animals, that the two lions killed at least 35 people, but they could have killed as many as 300 because only the workers at the railhead were counted, but not the ones from outlying villages that weren't part of the construction. I tend to think that they definitely killed over 100 because there is a high probability of these animals supplementing their diets with humans, because we know that they were also eating goats, donkeys, and they were also eating their regular prey of gazelles and stuff, based off of scientific analysis of the hides that were given to a museum by Patterson himself. And the biggest inaccuracy in this movie was actually about the lions themselves, which is that the two lions in the movie have these big burly manes. Tsavo male lions did not have manes. They were bigger than regular lions, but they did not have manes. They were maneless, which made them, in my opinion, even scarier. You got a much bigger lion that doesn't look like a normal lion, killing and eating human beings. And there's two of them working together. Very scary. So, I really think that's it for this movie. So, I know this wasn't one of my better movies reviews, but take what you can get. Catch you later, YouTube.